Although she is now recognized everywhere as the star of Scandal, in which she plays Olivia Pope, and anyone who has ever checked my Twitter knows that I am obsessed, almost to a point where I'm wearing my Olivia Pope inspired outfit tonight. Kerry Washington has played a range of roles. In each of them, she has maintained the dignity, intelligence, and sheer power that makes a star. For me, as a young woman in this industry, it is beautiful to watch her work on and off the screen, and I am lucky to have her as an inspiration. She shows that it is possible to be a concerned citizen as well as a public figure, and that's a lesson that I am taking to my heart as I look forward to a life of activism.
Black Lives Matter. At this point, it is a thing that we say, maybe even without fully thinking about it. And so I want to also just remind us that when we affirm that Black Lives Matter, it is critical to affirm alongside that Black women's lives matter. And there can be a particular kind of complexity to doing the work of making that claim. Because when we start talking about vulnerability to violence for Black women and for Black girls, it is not only the violence of institutions, not only state-sanctioned violence, but also interpersonal violence. To talk about the fact that Black women's lives matter sometimes means we have to talk about the harm that happens to Black women at the hands of Black men. And that can be difficult in a time when we are trying to think about the vulnerability of Black men's bodies. It is the very difficult work of intersectional feminism is to say that my life matters too, even in the context of fighting for yours. I sat next to Kerry as we watched the young women of Get Lit change the entire energy of this room. And I want to just say that her reaction to it is a reminder for me of the distinct memory I have of when I first fell in love with Kerry Washington. So obviously we're all endeared to her from Ray. We're all still pretty much pissed off about the brutality that her character experienced in The Last King of Scotland. And I don't think there's any way to quite capture the exquisite frenzy that happens, at least in my house, on Thursday evenings. Gladiators stride into our living rooms, and even my not yet 2-year-old knows it is time to make the popcorn. So I adore that Kerry Washington, but the Kerry Washington who fully captured my imagination is not mediated by script or by screen. The one who delights and inspires me is the Kerry that I realize now, extraordinarily privileged to encounter in a little classroom, wearing a ponytail on a weekday at Princeton University. She'd come to campus long before she was Olivia Pope to do a favor one afternoon for a beloved professor. She agreed to talk to this class of students. And so there was Kerry Washington sitting with a group of eager young adults, and I think responding in many of the ways that I saw her respond tonight to the young women of Get Lit, actually more enthusiastic about what they would say to her than thinking about what she might say to them. And that meant that she was funny and open and thoughtful and curious and passionate, and in that way really effortlessly captured their attention and their imaginations. And I teach a lot of college students, and to effortlessly capture the imaginations of those who at all points have email and porn available to them is It was really at that point watching her far-reaching and creative scope, her serious and self-reflective depth that made me a fan of her intellect. And I'm a little bit of a nerd lover, and it was clear to me that, in fact, Kerry Washington is a nerd through and through. So I admit to it. I have a bit of an embarrassing obsession. When I wrote my introduction the first time, my husband looked at me and said, "You sound like a slightly obsessed stalker." So I dialed it back a bit. But it's not only an obsession with the fierce but vulnerable Olivia Pope, who, by the way, is of course the stuff of colored girl dreams, because she casually drops references to Sally Hemings, insists on being recognized as the boss, and reminds us that the most intimate form of trust is when you let him watch you press your hair. But I'm also a fan of the real-life flesh and blood woman who wears the mantle of feminism eagerly and easily, and who has been an unwavering ally for LGBT struggles, who has insisted on the importance of arts education for our children, and who has used her voice and platform to advocate for survivors of domestic violence. I am an actual card-carrying member of the ACLU. And I support the ACLU because our civil liberties are the foundation of the American project in self-governance. I grew up at the University of Virginia, and that sentence that we heard earlier, that these truths are self-evident, that all persons are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that governments are instituted among free persons exclusively for the purpose of protecting those rights. We can never take for granted the importance of the freedom to speak, to assemble, to worship, and to responsibly, respectfully, and publicly disagree with one another. So the ACLU has stood for and fought for all of these freedoms with a kind of rare and undaunted and consistent courage. Advocacy, intellect, democratic engagement, free expression, rare courage. Indeed, these are the traits that are shared both by this beloved organization and by the extraordinary Kerry Washington. And I cannot imagine a greater honor than being present here tonight to ensure that this Phi Beta Kappa graduate of George Washington University, this leader of her own company, this voice for women and children, this advocate for political engagement, this creative force, that I am here to ensure that she is recognized by the ACLU of Southern California with the Bill of Rights Award to Citizen Kerry Washington.
Zendaya, you don't need me to tell you this, but you are fearless and fierce and smart and fabulous. You, wherever you are a true inspiration to me. Thank you for being here. I am so excited to be witnessing your future unfolding before us. Melissa, I continue to be in awe of you every single weekend from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. There is no one else who moves so gracefully from politics to academia to activism to pop culture, making the connections between those worlds and making us all smarter in the process. Thank you for being here and for creating a journalistic voice that feels like home for me. For some reason, this speech has been a very tough one for me to think about. This all feels so personal. I know that I'm supposed to stand up here and be that actress on that show who's got this great life and can share a little bit about my civic engagement and how happy I am to be doing it all. Let me explain. If you ask someone from the ACLU who their clients are, they always say the same thing. We only have one client, the Bill of Rights. Exhibit 1 for the defense, Can you tell I play somebody who went to law school? Exhibit 1 for the defense is always the same. It's that sacred document that begins with the words, "We the people." That's who the ACLU works for, the Constitution, the people. Now, I believe that when our founding fathers chose those 3 words, "We the people," as the start to the preamble, they meant it. But it turns out that in their minds, there were a lot of folks who were not included, who were not considered people. Women, apparently, weren't people. African Americans weren't people. Native Americans weren't people. Young people who were old enough to labor and fight our wars but not old enough to vote were not considered people. But for nearly a century, the ACLU has fearlessly fought to expand the legal definition of who we the people are. And that's important to me because I've spent my life being part of communities that are misunderstood and underrepresented in the legal world, in the political world, and in the media. Belonging to those communities is who I am. It has informed and continues to inform the choices I've made about the roles I play, and it has informed how I play them. I think I've been struggling, legitimately struggling, as my husband could attest to. I've been struggling with what to say tonight because the truth of what the ACLU does is that you fight to make this country accountable to its own vision. You fight for human beings to be seen as human, not 3/5 a person, not the lesser sex, not illegal or alien or other or wrong or sinful or unworthy. You fight to make sure that all of us are people in the eyes of the law. I think the fact that my very personhood as an African American, as a woman, as a granddaughter of immigrants, as a kid from the Bronx, the fact that my personhood is still so fragile in this country, that I feel how fragile my personhood is, that my daughter's personhood, that the personhood of so many of my loved ones is still so fragile, is heartbreaking to me. When they wrote the words, "We the people," so many of us were invisible to them. And if we are honest about the fight that is going on every single day at the ACLU, there are forces at work that want so many of us to remain invisible, but we won't allow it. Early on in life as an artist, I realized that by telling stories, by introducing new people and perspectives to the cultural conversation, we can open people's hearts and make room for social change. Art can do that. It's the work of the artist to invite you to consider your own heart through a new lens. But feelings are fluid. Emotions come and go. Once public consciousness has been made open for a shift, the shift has to be consecrated. It has to be legislated. It must be adjudicated. It must be made true. And that is what the ACLU does. There is something very surreal about what is happening tonight, at least for me. 23 years ago, Professor Anita Hill was honored with this exact same award at this exact same dinner. Some of you may know that this past summer, I was blessed with the opportunity to produce and act in an HBO film about the confirmation hearings for Justice Clarence Thomas. I spent my summer being Anita Hill. I feel as though I have spent quite a bit of time studying every word she has ever said, but one of my favorite quotes of hers is, "We've got to understand that all disenfranchised people have something in common, and the pursuit of justice really is about equality for everyone." Professor Hill talks often about how we must fight for equality for everyone in a country whose very constitution stands for equal rights. We are still fighting that fight. So I am truly grateful to be here, but what I am celebrating tonight is you. I celebrate your willingness to fight, to struggle, to defend my seat at the table, to defend my very personhood and the personhoods of people I love. If I am emotional, it is because this is personal. This is about me and my fellow human beings being seen as fully human, as equal. And it doesn't matter how many seasons of a television show I'm on, or how many awards I win, or how many best dressed lists I appear on. I am in danger of not feeling human in my country because of who I am. In Hollywood, we are in the business of telling stories about heroes. But you, ACLU Southern California, because where the ACLU Southern California goes, the ACLU National goes. You are my heroes. You are our real heroes. So I am truly humbled by this recognition. And as I stand here tonight, I pledge to continue to do whatever I can in my own work to affirm and celebrate and embody and defend each other's humanity in our culture while you do it in our courts of law. I am endlessly grateful. Thank you.